It's working. Good morning. Glad everybody could make it. This was kind of an interesting project. Martha thought about asking Ken to talk. I asked Ken to talk, and Ken told me, yes, I'll come talk. So Ken and I grew up within 5 miles of each other, maybe. From the top of the farm where I was raised to the farm where he was raised, we could see each other. And there was a whole watershed of the Elton Creek between us, but we, and then never really got to know each other till we went to college, because our families never really interacted much. My father and Ken's father were cousins. And they lived in another town, so, you know, you had to go a long way to see them. Anyways, we got to know each other much better. Ken, my brother, and I were all at Cornell at the same time. And at about the time that we went to college, I stopped making syrup. Our family did. And shortly after that, Ken got out of college and started making syrup. So syrup is in our families going back, we know for sure, over 100 years. But everybody in Western New York who had maple trees made syrup. And a lot's changed. When I started the first time, I remember gathering sap. It was a sleigh, or a pung, as they were called, pulled by 2 horses. Everything was gathered out of buckets by hand, dragged over, dumped in the tank, taken over to the sugar house, and the laborious process of making sugar started and went from there. So the business is much changed. The product hasn't changed, just the process. So anyways, I'm going to turn the process over to my cousin, Ken Robley, and his wife, Gloria. And this is a team effort, and all maple syrup is team efforts. And still mostly all done by families. So he's all yours.
Question. Remember? Anybody can ask questions, do it.
Yes. If you have a question, raise your hand, and they'll try to answer it. And at the end of the program, they have brought some maple sugar candy, which is all, grab a piece. And if anybody wants syrup, they brought some extra quarts. And we'll just see me and we'll figure out how to get the payment straightened out. It's $15 a quart, so. And we know nobody in Scotia ever carries cash with them, so.
Now,
Yes?
are you talking about our maple tree? Maple trees like we have?
No. Acer saccharum, which is the northern sugar maple, or the sugar maple, pretty much doesn't exist in this area. There's a few, but sugar maples are hard to find. We have Acer rubrum, which is red maple or swamp maple. You probably could make syrup from it, but I'm not sure what it would taste like.
Okay. Can people hear me?
Need the microphone.
Okay, they've got me hooked up to this one, so if you can hear me, it's working. Good. Thanks, Al. Well, welcome to Maple Syruping 101. We're good. I'm not using this. We're going to cover a lot of ground. Hopefully I won't bore you. Gloria's given me orders not to be boring. So we'll try to keep it interesting. And she's going to handle the quiz at the end of the session. So she doesn't quite know about that yet. You didn't know about that? Well, I guess we won't have a quiz then. So you're in luck. All right. Well, we're going to try to take a walk through the woods and look at the sugar bush. We're going to go back in time and look at how maple sugaring used to be done. And then also we'll look inside the modern sugar house today. What you see on the first slide here is our sugar house. That's what it's called. And some people call it a sugar shack. But this is our sugar house in Western New York. So, where are we from? Now, if this is, oh, that's great. We are located right in Western New York, right about at the point of the cursor in Cattaraugus County, right about there. And as you can see, we're well within the range of the northern sugar maple, or Acer saccharum. It gets into the Midwest, it's up in Canada, and incidentally, Canada produces 70% of the world's maple syrup. So in this area up in here in Canada, they're producing 70% of all the maple syrup produced. All this area down in here is about 30% in the US, 30% production. And Quebec, which is in this area here, produces actually 90% of Canada's syrup production. This shows the maple leaf of our sugar maple. Okay, Al mentioned red maple or soft maple. We actually have two maples within the sugar bush that we tap. And the one we prefer is the sugar maple, Acer saccharum. And notice how the leaf margin is different in the sugar maple. It's called entire, so that's an entire edge. And then here is the red maple. Doesn't produce quite as much sap and as much sugar, and that has a serrate margin. So these are the two that we tap in our sugar bush. Silver maple is also tapped, but we don't have those. So these are the two maples that we use. And Al talked about the southern sugar maple or Florida maple. I think the old scientific name was Acer barbatum. And you can see the range of that is throughout North Carolina, down into Georgia, and even down into Florida. So this is a maple that can tolerate warm temperatures, and scientists believe that if climate change affects our Acer saccharum, our northern maple, that this Florida maple or southern sugar maple could be planted in the north to produce syrup. So that's interesting to hear about the southern sugar maple. I think it's best to start talking about maple trees. This is the basis for our business, and we really like our trees. As a matter of fact, some of them have names. This tree is quite old, it's quite large, one of the, a very old tree in the sugar bush. This is Big Sis here because it's a sister tree to this very interesting tree. And this is the bathtub tree. And I got to show you a picture of this maple. Something happened to this tree when it was very young. It got bent over. And when I was a kid and a young man, this was filled with water every year in the spring. So it was known as the bathtub tree. And we tap that tree now. So we have some really old trees left in the sugar bush. This hollow tree is actually about 30 plus inches in diameter. It is hollow, but older than 200 years possibly, and also a refuge for wildlife. And I don't know if you can see it in this slide, but we have some wildlife sitting there. We'll go to another slide, and now you should be able to see what that is. It's a northern screech owl. And when I was tapping, we came up to the tree to tap, and that owl sat right there as I drilled the hole into the tree. So besides making maple syrup, we're able to produce a crop, an agricultural crop, that preserves wildlife habitat. The trees are able to sequester carbon, which is considered to be important now. So it is quite a environmentally friendly crop. So what makes a good tree for making maple syrup or in producing sap? Well, you want a tree that's at least 12 inches in diameter, and this is a very large old tree. And the other thing that's important is what we call the crown. And this up here is the crown, and you can see this tree has a very large crown. A lot of leaves are producing, through photosynthesis, sugars that are transported throughout the tree and stored. So that's what makes a good maple production tree. So how did we find out about making maple syrup? Well, the northern woodland Indians were making maple syrup by the time that the colonial European settlement occurred. And I looked on the internet, I couldn't really find any reference to when actually they discovered it, but there's many stories on the internet, so if you're interested, you could check that out. Just Google Native Americans maple syrup, and you'll find some interesting stories. But the way they made it is just, it seems almost really difficult, if not tiring. They used a hollow log for processing and concentrating the maple sap. And it shows here a hollowed out logs that they were using. And they would heat stones and then drop the stones into the sap to boil the water away. I don't know how they kept ash out of the maple syrup, but they really prized the sugar that they got from this process. The other thing they did, and it's mentioned in the references I read, is they actually let the sap freeze and they would lift the ice off the top, which is mainly water. And that would help them in concentrate that sap down to syrup. And then they would go to this technique of placing heated stones in. They used bark, often birch bark, to make baskets to gather the sap. And you can see here, here's the basket, and then here's the spile. They used a hollow spout sometimes. Other times it would be just an axe mark with some type of a spout below the scar on the tree. It shows a Native American woman with the birch bark baskets and these homemade spiles where the sap drips out of into the baskets. This shows a hollow Native American spile with sap flowing out of it. Now, what makes sap flow? Sap runs when we get freezing temperatures followed by temperatures warming during the day up to the low 40s. If we get temperatures up into the 60s, that damages the sap and creates off flavors. So we like the cooler temperatures, ranging from above freezing up into about 45 degrees. And that creates sap flow. Sap flow is caused by the pressure of carbon dioxide within the cells of the tree. There's some respiration that takes place. It produces carbon dioxide. And we get pressures building up, and that pushes the sap around the tree. The colonial settlers learned from the Native Americans that sugar, a sweetener, could be made from maple sap, and maple sap began to be made in iron kettles that were hung from posts or over fires. I talked to my neighbor, and he was aware of kettles in several farms around us that were left in the woods. So so many of the farms had these kettles. And this was how the settlers made their sweetener. They didn't have cane sugar to use, but maple was available, so this is how your sugar was made if you had a farm or you were, you were an early settler in the Northeast. And the Native Americans also used the sugar that they produce as a trade item. So they were using this and trading with other Native American tribes, their maple sugar that they made. Also, my grandmother told me that she saw her friend Clyde Blackman making syrup in a kettle in our sugar bush. This would have been prior to World War II, so that would have been in probably the late 30s or maybe the early 40s. So what's here? Well, this may be the site where Clyde actually did some of the early boiling in the kettle. There's a depression here, and this is almost an archaeological site. This is a site where somebody made maple syrup and probably had a pan or the kettle in this area here. There's a coal ash pile down in this area, and there's this reddish color on the rocks is evidence of heating. So somebody actually made syrup many years ago at that location in our sugar bush. Al talked about buckets. This is the way prior to the 1960s that syrup was collected in these galvanized buckets with covers. And you had to go to each tree with a sled and a tank or a trailer and a tank and gather that sap from each tree. It was pretty labor intensive.
Or a 5-gallon bucket and drag it.
And drag the bucket without spilling it to the tractor and the trailer. Yes, sir.
Look at the size of those containers. How long would it take to fill up one of those from a normal, good tree?
Oh, well, that's a good question. A good sap flow can give you 3 gallons of sap during a flow. So I would say that's, 2 gallons in one of them?
And they could overflow overnight.
So how many times a year do you have a flood? Just once?
I can't hear her.
Once.
Okay.
She's, when, time.
One per tree?
Yeah, one. Well, some of these larger trees would get
6.
up to 6 buckets in Al's sugar bush. I had maybe 3 when I was using buckets.
Do you check them every day?
Yeah, you're collecting every day, sometimes twice a day, to keep up with the run.
What happens in trees that nobody punches anything in and they don't flow into something? What trees that are not used for sap production, does it just accumulate or finally go away, or?
Well, it's used by the tree.
Oh, okay.
To feed the cells of the tree and, to promote tree growth. We're just kind of stealing it in the spring. But we don't take so much that the tree dies. The trees survive very well. We're going to talk about the healing that takes place in a few minutes. Okay, so how do we do this today? It's amazing how much technology has come along. We have a lot of technology to help us out. And when I started tapping when I got out of college, I first started using maple tubing, and that's when it came into being, is during the 60s. And we're going to pass around some of this so you can handle it and see what it looks like. First of all, we're going to, you might as well pass this out too, get that started. Mainline tubing. This is my daughter, Leah, and she helped me install this 1-inch main line that we use for collecting from each tree. We have 13,000 feet. That's better than 2 miles of inch and 1 1/4 inch main line. So these are the big tubes that collect sap. This is Gloria in December, and we're laying out a new main line up through a small gully. We set the main line on a grade so it runs to the sap house, and we have the lateral lines by gravity flow into the main line. And on this, one of the samples coming around, you'll see how we connect the small tubing to the main line. We have all kinds of fittings that connect the lines together. It's all suspended so it stays out of the snow and the rodents don't chew on it. So it's suspended to make a nice even grade. And it's suspended from a real heavy wire with fasteners. We also have valves at each end of the main line so we can.
There was a question, what is a sugar bush?
Okay, somebody had a question, what is a sugar bush? The sugar bush is actually the woodlot or the woods that we're tapping and removing sap from. So collectively it's called a sugar bush.
How many trees do you have tapped at the present time?
We have 1,522 trees tapped on our operation in our sugar bush. That's about all I can handle myself. I've got a few more trees I could tap, but she doesn't want me to tap them because she says I have enough. And she hears about all my aches and pains, so we're just about at our limit. We have 30,440 feet of the 5/16 inch line.
You have another question, so wait for a second for their question.
Is there another question?
I had a question.
Okay, I'll try to hear you.
Oh, I'll be mic'd. When you're finished with the season of tapping, do you have to flush out those tubes, or do they just stay?
Good
Yeah.
question. At the end of the program, I do have a picture of how we flush it, but we do clean
I
the
jumped
tubing.
the gun, sorry.
And that's even more work.
Maybe clean before and after.
So it's cleaned at the end of the season. And then during the season, we're cleaning tanks constantly to keep the tanks sanitized. So 1,522 trees. You can see the lateral lines coming down the slope into main line here. Okay, tapping. Brought along a tapping bit. You can see what we put into or drill the holes with. We used to do this by hand back in the 70s. We had a bit brace and they were all drilled by hand, but now we have these wonderful drills with really good batteries, and we can tap really all day with these 5 ampere hour batteries, and really helps us out. You drill, we drill 5/16 inch holes. You'll see the bit when it comes around. We try to keep the hole small so we don't create any excessive wounding to the tree. We drill in only 2 inches into the outer sapwood of the tree. And it's a white colored wood on the outside just under the bark, and that's where the sap is flowing. So we only have to drill in 2 inches to get that sap to get into the spile. It's also drilled at a slight upward angle. So what happens when you drill into a tree over a period of 25 or 50 years? Well, this is what results. You have all kinds of holes within the maple wood itself. This is a board that was sawn from a sugar maple, and you can see there are numerous holes. And then there's, what I wanted to point out, are these dark lines that come down from the holes and above the holes. That is dead wood. So when you're out there tapping, you've got to be watching the tree, looking for old scars, old holes, so you don't tap directly above an old tap hole, because you would be drilling into dead wood and you wouldn't get sap. So what you have to do is you have to be at least 14 inches above a previous hole and off at least, we like to be 3 inches at least off to the side of any previous hole or scar. So
drilling the hole and having dead wood does not.
would somebody give her the mic? I'm sorry, ma'am. I have hearing aids and I
Okay,
have
okay,
hearing
sorry.
loss, so
So drilling the holes does not introduce insects or anything, the holes that are not used anymore? And they don't kill the tree?
what it can do is introduce fungus
Okay.
that can cause rot in the tree and decay. So we're going to look at healing that takes place. On the next slide, I think we can look at some healing and how the tree responds. But in order to get sap production, we have to avoid these old scars that come above and below the tap holes.
So you cannot reuse a tap hole?
No, that wood is dead the next season. So you have to go, so we're looking at a maple right here, and in order to tap this is an old scar. From the cambium layer, which is just under the bark, new wood has been deposited and new bark, and it's covered up the old hole, and that's what we see. The hole, after about 2 years, it's completely covered. Bark is growing over the hole, and on the inside, it's laying down brand new sapwood over that hole. So, but to get sap, we would have to come over here or over on this side to avoid that dead wood. So the tree responds quite well usually. It heals over, and we search for new wood. Here's Gloria again. She's helping me tap, and these are the kind of conditions that we have during when we start in the 1st of February tapping. We had, this year I think we had just over 2 feet of snow in the woods, and so we're on snowshoes. And this year we had a lot of snow, so we were on snowshoes again this year.
How long do you do that each year?
It's about, the season lasted about 3 weeks this year before it got too warm and we had to stop. So we need the colder temperatures to keep going.
Varied every year. It varies.
What?
Tell them it varies.
Yeah, the season can be longer or shorter depending on the weather. If we get a lot of warm weather, it can be very short. So this is my daughter, Darlene, and she's helping me tap. We actually tap lightly with a hammer to drive. And you show them that these are check valves. These are actually what goes into the trees. You can see those. And the check valve, there's a check valve in these, a little rubber ball that seals the spout. So we don't have water coming or sap coming back up the drop line and back into the tree hole. Because what would happen is bacteria would come in and start bacterial action in that tap hole, and it would seal off. So we have the check valves are coming around. You can look at those. Now here's the installation with the check valve and the stubby spout that snaps into it. And so that's a nice sealed tap.
I got a question.
Yes.
Yeah, like I need a microphone. Okay, you have 1,500 trees. Do you tap every tree every year? Because I'm doing some math in my head, and that's a really long work day.
We tap every tree every year.
So during the season when you're tapping, you work 10-hour days?
Well, if I last that long, it's, 8 hours is enough on snowshoes in
Well, that-
those
yeah.
conditions. But you're going to hear more about the number of taps. I'm a retired wildlife biologist, so I got to throw in a wildlife slide. And so SAP isn't the only thing that's running when we get those thaws. We have the Virginia opossum in New York now, and this guy came running by our porch, and I saw him after a thaw and went out and picked him up, and he's alive. I don't know if he's playing possum or not, but what's interesting is we've had some climate change. Because opossums only reached New York around 1900. We didn't have them before that, but things have warmed up some, and now we have opossum in New York, and they're as far north now as into Ontario, Canada. So opossums have come northward.
About the only thing that moves north.
So the main lines collect sap at the sugar house, and this here is a sap extractor, and that is under vacuum pressure. All the lines are given vacuum pressure, and so we're actually sucking sap out of the trees. So this is a sap releaser. It's 2 tanks, and it rotates between one tank to the other tank when it is releasing. So, and these are our storage tanks underneath the releaser. This is the vacuum pump we use. It's a rotary vane pump. It can provide up to 26 inches of mercury vacuum at the sap house, and we get that, good vacuum pressure right to the top of the main lines. So that doubled our production when we put vacuum on the trees. So that was a really good investment, is installing vacuum. You could do crazy things with vacuum. This is a sap ladder, and the vacuum that we have in this line here is lifting our sap from these lower lines up about 12 feet. So that helps us out. The vacuum's lifting it so we can tap trees that are below the sugar house. Okay, a good sap run can produce 3 gallons of sap per tap hole. At our Maple Ridge farm, we have tanks that can store up to 3,685 gallons. These stainless steel tanks are what we store the sap in. The poly tanks are what we put permeate in for rinsing our RO machines.
Tell them what permeate is.
Right, okay. So these are the workhorses of the maple industry. These machines, these are our reverse osmosis machines. Here's one machine here. Here's a somewhat larger machine. So what these machines now do is they take sap that is about 1.5% sugar. Sometimes in a good run, it's up to 2%, and they boost it up to 10 to 12% before we try to cook it in the evaporator. that is a removal of 84 to 88% of the water. So we're removing thousands of gallons of water from that sap before we try to boil it. Reverse, so how does that work? Well, this canister has a very fine membrane in it, and there are pumps that pump the sap in under pressure, and that forces the water through the membrane, and then the sap or concentrate flows outside and is pumped into tanks near the evaporator. So that's, I've got some other slides that show the principle. So normally like a water filter is like this. It's hollow. It has a center portion that the water, when you filter water in your house, the pressure forces the water through the membrane here, and it exits through the hole in the bottom to go to your faucet. Well, this is a little bit different because rather than just having one membrane, which we have here in this filter, we have many membranes that are wrapped, and they're actually wrapped in a motion around a circular motion. And then instead of going in from the side, the sap comes in the end. It comes through the end of the membrane, and it goes through, this actually shows the membranes. And so it's going between membranes as it's flowing down this pressurized filter or membrane. So it's a little more complicated, but yes.
Do you use the water that's extracted for anything else, or is it just kind of dumped? Or
Okay, that's called permeate. And I got another slide here. So permeate. So this right here is that hole in the membrane, and that is collecting permeate. And we save the permeate because that goes outside into those poly tanks, and we have to flush the membrane at the end of every day with the permeate to remove sugars that build up on the membrane. So this is the membrane here. And we have to wash sugar and stuff that builds up on the membrane. So we have to save the permeate. So essentially what the RO is doing, sap is hitting the membrane, the sugars don't go through, the water goes through as permeate, pure water, and we collect it for rinsing. And the concentrate, which is the sugars, flows on the outside of the membrane, and that's collected for boiling. What?
Some people keep it and they use it to drink, too.
Oh, to drink? Yeah, you can drink the permeate. It's pure water. It's like distilled water. All right, we'll try to follow the path of the concentrated sap. So it goes from the RO room up into this concentrate tank, and then it flows down through this pipeline into what we have a sap preheater here inside. So that's the boiling sap actually heats the incoming sap up to at least 180 degrees. So we preheat the cold sap coming in through using steam from the evaporator. And it just shows we have a temperature gauge. We can read the temperature that we're producing. This shows the sap preheater. So sap enters the top here and flows down through the tubes, and the steam coming off from the boiling sap heats that. Okay, this is the flue pan. This is a very important part of the evaporator. This is the evaporator. This is the arch down here, the place where the wood is burnt. This is the flue pan. This is a syrup pan. These are steam hoods and preheaters in here. Okay, we're looking inside the arch, in the firebox of the arch, up into the flue pan. And you can see it's corrugated. And those corrugations, instead of heating up a 3 by 5 foot pan, we're heating up a 5 by 28 foot area of heating surface. So it assists in the boiling a lot, having the flue pan. We use wood, we fire with wood, and it gets extremely hot. The doors on the evaporator can get up to, well, they can be red hot from boiling. And we produce a lot of steam. On some days, we'll see a huge cloud coming out of the evaporator. So how does that magic work? The syrup is actually concentrated through heat, and the hot sap that's coming in from the flue pan circulates in the syrup pan here in the front, back and forth, and it exits through these openings. So it comes in here, circulates down here, and then goes to the draw-off area. And that's, the heat is what is pushing that to concentrate it. Just a diagram that kind of shows how it goes back and forth through the partitions to where it's drawn off as syrup. Another technology we have is an automatic draw-off. And that is a sensor that senses the temperature in the pan. These are the probes that go down into the hot syrup, and they sense the temperature when it is at the correct density and opens a valve that draws off the hot syrup. So that saves us a lot of work there by having this automatic draw-off, drawing it off at the right density. After it's drawn off, we filter. They can see what a filter is. We have a pressure filter that filters the syrup, and we're sending around the papers that are put in the pressure filter. This is the syrup here inside the chambers, and we have on each side filter papers, and it's pushed through the filter papers. And impurities, like we get quite a lot of calcium buildup. The trees uptake calcium carbonate or lime, and that's called sugar sand. And you can see some of this sugar sand building up on the papers here on either side. So we have to remove the sugar sand from the syrup. By seeing the pictures, it looks like the women do all the work. Well, I help. I really do. Gloria does the bottling, and we bottle in half gallons and quarts. Interesting, it's just like home canning. You have to maintain a hot temperature to seal. And we have a thermometer on our canning tank, and we have to maintain that at 180 or hotter. So we have to can at least 180 degrees. And we have a little heater on the bottom of the tank to get the temperature up to that hot temperature. Colors. There's different grades and tastes to maple syrup. Usually during the beginning of the season, we get less bacteria in the lines, and we produce this real nice light syrup, and it's called golden now by the grading system that's used in the syrup industry. The medium, what used to be medium syrup, is now called amber, and then we also have dark, and that's the color here, and then very dark is and these are all table grade. syrups. So what you have here is with taste, and the golden is a very light taste. And then as you get to the dark, the flavor, the maple flavor increases. It becomes stronger. And some people prefer the dark over the golden. And other people like the light taste of the golden.
Is sugar content the same?
Sugar content the same.
It varies from year to year, and it can vary during the season. We started out, our first runs were down to 1.3%, and we got some 2.0% a little later in the season. So it varies depending on, the activity of the trees, the temperatures. Yes?
How much sap does it take after you do all your processing where it actually ends up as your maple syrup product?
Okay, good question. And that depends on the content, the percentage sugar. At 1.5% sugar, it takes about 53 gallons to make a gallon of maple. When it gets down to 2%, it's like 43. But the ROs, we can boil 1.3% because the ROs are taking out so much water that when it hits our evaporator, we have to boil away 7 gallons to make a gallon of maple syrup. Now, years ago, when I first started, before we had ROs, I would have to boil 53 gallons down to make a gallon. Now it's just 7 gallons. So we're saving a lot of wood and a lot of energy with the ROs. So
Is there a difference in the cost when you sell it for each of these grades, these color grades?
good question. Yes, there's a little bit of difference. Right now, these two grades here are about, I think this year they were $2.65 a pound. And a gallon of maple syrup is 11 pounds. So these are about, and these were the darker syrup, the dark and very dark, they were down, I think 10 cents less a pound. So they would have been like $2.55 a pound for these darker grades.
Which one do you sell the most of?
I would say medium. Yeah. Most of the season is medium. This would be early in the season, and then you get into dark later as the temperatures come up.
So the industry decides the pricing for everyone, or does it?
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry,
Does the industry decide the pricing? How does the pricing get decided?
Yeah. And Canada influences the price because they make so much. So the price is often set after Canada gets done producing their syrup. We sell our syrup to Randy Sprague. He's a buyer for Bascom's Maple in New Hampshire. And Randy buys about 200 drums of maple and ships it out to Bascom's. And we sell it to Randy. Randy's, you can see he's color grading. He's checking the color. And then also the taste. So we sell most of our syrup goes bulk. Randy, we're a small producer in New York. Randy produces from 40,000 taps. He hires people to help him, has a very big evaporator and ROs. But just to let you know, we were pretty small. Here's operation with 40,000 taps. And in New Hampshire, I've heard there is a sugar bush of 250,000 taps. So that's a lot of work. This just shows Randy's drum area when he's buying. These are 40-gallon stainless drums, and syrup is packed in these 40-gallon stainless drums now. No galvanized material in the industry now. It's all stainless. Another wildlife slide. We have a spring box near the sugar house, and I use it for getting water for cleaning. And we have one or more spring salamanders that show up in that box in the water. I've seen these enter the rocks of the spring, and I believe they go up inside the hill underneath the sugar bush some distance. So they're part of our sugar operation. They're another wildlife species that's there. And I just want to say, North Carolina has 3 subspecies of spring salamander. You've got the northern spring salamander at the northern part of the mountains in North Carolina. You have a Blue Ridge spring salamander and also a Carolina spring salamander. So you have these guys too.
Can you give us an idea of what a normal day for you would be during the season?
A normal day. Okay, it could be getting up at 3 a.m. to go up and to see if the tanks are going to run over and turn on one of the ROs to try to get ahead of the sap run. So it might start that way at 3 o'clock in the morning, but oftentimes I'm starting around 6 or 7 a.m. to go up, get the RO started, clean the evaporator flues, and get ready to boil. And then we'll boil until hopefully we're done by 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening, and we get to go to bed. Now in the old days, people would boil all night because they didn't have the ROs to make it more efficient. So you could be up till 2 o'clock in the morning, and I tried to do it all night and go to work once, and that didn't work out.
Can't read a book anymore like we used to.
And Gloria reminded us, we used to read books because it took so long to make a gallon of syrup off the evaporator. We would get, before the RO technology, we'd make 1 gallon per hour of syrup on the evaporator. Now we make 10. So it's really improved our efficiency. Yes, sir.
Because you're using a vacuum to suck the syrup out of the tree, does the sap out of the tree, does the sap ever freeze in your lines overnight?
Oh, yeah. And that can be a problem. I can go up to the sugar house and I'll find that sap extractor has been filled with ice, and I've got to thaw that all out. And then the lines, they thaw themselves. You just have to wait for the sap in the sunlight to warm up the lines to get them flowing. Yes?
What's your profit margin?
I don't know if I should say that with Gloria here. But
Do the books.
it's really low, as in most farming businesses. We are paying back for our equipment investment right now. And in about 3 years, that'll be paid off, and we'll be doing quite well. We do get some damage. The biggest threats that we have right now are gray squirrels. We just got gray squirrels into our area of Cattaraugus County since about 2006, and they chew on the maple trees. They strip the bark off the maples, and then they also chew the tubing. So that's one of the biggest problems we have right now. And right now, when I go back home, I'm going to finish cleaning the lines. I've got them over half done. And we pump through the lines a mild chlorine solution. And we have to do that to clean the lines and stop fungal and bacterial growth. And I think
Do you keep the lines in place year-round, or do you pull them?
we keep them in place. If I had to take them down, I wouldn't do it. But when I started in the 70s, when I had just over 300 taps, we would take them all down, roll them up, and then wash them on a special washing machine. But now we leave them in place, and I elevate them. The lines are elevated about 5 to 6 feet up off the ground, so foxes and coyotes, raccoons can't chew on them.
Squirrels can. So deer doesn't bother?
Deer also chew on it. I don't know what there is about that plastic tubing, but things like to chew on it. And you'll see some teeth marks that are molar marks that definitely are deer chewing on the lines.
Is there not like a product or a coating you can put on your lines to deter them?
I haven't tried that. It would be a lot of work to try to put something on it. The biggest damage is the damage to the trees. The squirrels chew the bark off the base of the trees to get to the cambium layer in May and June, and it leaves a huge scar on the tree and it lets in rot. So the squirrels are a big challenge. Any other questions? Because I think that is our last.
Yeah, one more over there.
What is the shelf life of your final product?
Okay, if you freeze it, you can keep it for years. In the refrigerator, it may darken some, as it sits in the refrigerator. But if it's sealed, it's in the refrigerator? Sometimes you'll get mold on the very top of it, and what you can do is if you reheat that, you can skim that off, and it'll be as good as the new syrup. So that's all I have, folks. Oh, yes, ma'am.
At the end of your season, do you just have the summer off, then just to enjoy the summertime?
Well, that after I get the tubing washed, I got to cut the wood for the next season. So it's like farming. You're continually having things to do. Yes, sir.
With the squirrels and the deer gnawing on the tubing, how do you find that there's a hole in it? You got vacuum, so it's not squirting out, I guess. How do you find when you have a hole? Does the vacuum not work as well, or?
Right. What happens, on that sap extractor, we've got a gauge, and that tells us how much vacuum we have. If that drops down, we know there's a problem up there. And I go and start turning valves off and try to find that main line that has the leak. So sometimes I'll be up in the woods and with a telephone, and she'll be at the sap extractor watching the gauge, and we're shutting things off to trying to isolate the leaks. But yeah, that happens. Trees fall on the lines. They get, sometimes the frost will open them up. So that's another job during the maple season, trying to keep the vacuum level up. So we do have the handout. We have the samples, and I want everyone to take one of the maple sugar samples. Thank you.
Thank you.
The quartz are not samples, by the way, in case you didn't know. Thank you, Ken. The question you had about how long syrup will keep, if it's sealed properly, it'll keep for, just in a jar, probably 5-10 years. I mean, it's vacuum sealed, essentially. It's really hot when it goes in, so and it used to be everybody canned in glass, and you don't see glass much anymore. My mother canned everything in glass, and we found syrup I just found syrup last year that I've had for 10 years, so.
What about after you open?
After you open, you have to refrigerate, and I've never seen mold we use it fast enough so that the answer is you just keep using syrup to get through.
Does it do anything to the taste, or is it
No,
just visually?
It doesn't, and it visually doesn't change either. I mean,
Mold on top.
it's a little, I've never seen mold on syrup, so
Change the taste.
it doesn't bother the taste at all. So anyways, no more Mrs. Butterworths.
Yay!
There's samples of, that's even worse. Samples of maple sugar candy back there that they made, and pick up a piece on your way out, and it's time for lunch. And there'll be something coming in the future, and Bob or Karen will let you know what it is.